Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Fans in Motion, the Ultimate Night Ranger podcast. Joining me today is a guy who goes all the way back to the beginning, and I mean the absolute beginning. Inside this guy's head is everything Night Ranger history. This is going to be great. Guitar tech, like a guru, right? You're like probably the most sought after guitar tech there is out there. So I hear and so I read. Is Mr. Mark Newman. Mark, thank you for joining me on the number one Night Ranger podcast.
My pleasure.
So
Not so sure about the most sought after thing.
now listen,
Big Dave rule.
I'm just telling you what I see, out there on the internet from the biggest musicians. So it's not my words, it's theirs. Um, but for those who watch all the podcasts, you guys will remember Mark from it's been maybe a year or two ago. We had Mark come on with all the 80s Night Ranger uh roadies, Sarge, and well, you're Sarge. We had Frogmore and Biff
Yeah.
and the is it Duke?
Yep. Came in.
And they told all the great stories, bacon and eggs in the morning, all that good stuff, um, from being on the road with the guys back in the 80s. But this one we're going to focus solely on Mark's career, and me and him talked for a few minutes beforehand, and I mean, this is going to be great. So listen, this is what the podcast is all about, getting all this great great information. So let's lead into Mark. Where did all this kick off, man? Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Sewanee, Tennessee, but I wasn't there very long for, you know, 8 months or so.
Hmm.
That's why I've got the southern drawl now. Moved to the West Coast and grew up in Santa Barbara. And then by hook and by crook, eventually moved to Alameda, California, and lived across the street from Brad at one point.
So you lived across. When did you and Brad kind of become aware of each other?
Right before Night Ranger, really, I think he had another band called the Alameda All Stars with a couple other, well, him and Kelly Kagi were the band, and
Hmm.
Danny Chauncey, the 38 Special, etc. Over the years, was actually at one point, me and Brad and Danny were roommates in one of Brad's houses later on.
Really?
But
Now,
that's another story. We were all on Sherman Ave or Sherman Street, whatever it is in Alameda. And I lived across the street from him, and he used to, come skating by all the time. And I'd chit chat with him, and he goes, "Hey man, I got this band, Alameda All Stars. You should come down and hang out. Park Street Saloon,
hmm.
Alameda."
Now, were you a musician as well?
Kind of.
And um, I know you said you lived across the street. Now, were you on were you doing bands? Were you on the same circuit as he was, or?
No, not at that point.
Mm,
I kind of morphed into that. Started hanging out with Brad, from time to time. Went saw a few, All Star shows. And
mm.
next thing I knew, the gear was being stored in my garage, and I at that time I was working for meat companies as a foreman, that sort of thing, and I would bring rental trucks and that kind of stuff, vans, that sort of thing, home pretty much every day. So I would just grab the stuff, go down there, one man, crew, and set up all the shit for them, and then I'd go get some sleep while they were playing, and then I'd get up super early, go grab the gear if I could uh, after their show, and then I would go to work at the meat company super early, and or I'd get home early in the afternoon or something sometimes,
Mm.
and I'd go unload the gear there or set it up, or I was just like, it seemed like I was never not working at that
Yeah.
life.
Now, were Was this your first? I mean, I know you were doing, you had the other, you were doing the meat packing. Was this your first like, you know, job where you were doing kind of the roadie part, or
First
had
time I ever got paid as a roadie, yes.
all right. Now, do you remember the first time seeing, Brad play?
Well, the Alameda All Stars.
Mm,
Yeah, he was, a hell of a player way back then, even.
mm.
And that's, why he got the Ozzy gig because Pat Thrall suggested he was the right one for that band.
And so Alameda All Stars is right after Rubicon. And we're talking maybe what year would this be? 79, 80?
Uh, I don't know.
Yeah.
80, 80, 80-ish as far as my
Yeah.
involved.
The way I understood it was they kind of did the Alameda All Stars to make money, maybe why Ranger wrote
Yep.
and stuff
I
like
remember
that.
Brad telling me we were in the car, his car, driving around somewhere one time, and he goes, "Yeah, I've got another band that I'm more serious about. That's they didn't quite have a name yet. Um, the first night I worked for him, as I remember, they were called Stereo,
Mm.
but I don't know that the print agrees with me. But that's how I remember it. And they were warming up for Gamma, I believe.
So, the whole stereo era is again something that there's just not a lot out there. So, um, when you were involved with stereo, was that lineup, the Watson, Fitz, Blades, Kagi,
Yep.
Gillis lineup? And what was so when, he's working with that and he brings you into that, um, did anything stick out? Did you say, "Oh shit, this is really good," or "Oh, this is
Well,
just another"?
the first night or first day I was exposed to them, Brad took me to rehearsal with him, which was in the living room of when Jeff and Kelly and Fitz lived together up there in Mill
Mm.
Valley up on the hill. Uh, and I know one of the times I sat there during rehearsals, it may have been that time, they actually wrote "Don't Tell Me You Love Me" right in front of me.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
come on, you got to just give
Well,
us
I
a.
was sitting there and they were playing in their living room, and
Mm.
they literally wrote that song while I was
It
sitting there.
is it something, when that, I guess, as a fan and looking back, it's like all that had to be magical or some, it,
Well, I definitely at that time was like, "Holy shit, these guys are bad as hell." I mean, the two
mm,
guitars were ridiculous, you know.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and with those guys writing this, writing the solo parts and that kind of shit, they were pretty amazing. And actually, during the recording of the first Night Ranger record, we were all staying at the Oakwoods up there on Barham Boulevard in Burbank, and I was staying with them, the two guitar brothers, because they had an apartment and I was
Mm.
on the couch of the apartment, and so those guys were working out their parts, in the living room of the apartment, and watching those guys put this stuff together was pretty amazing.
Now, were you involved at all? I mean, do you remember when they recorded their original demo with Gary Peel?
Yes,
Okay.
I was actually at the house at Gary's place.
Just give us some of your, thought, memories of that. I mean, we know that the tape exists and we know that it happened, but obviously, you know, you're one of the few that was there. What's your thoughts
Boy,
and
that was a
memories?
long time ago. I kind of barely remember that part. I more remember picking up one of Sammy Hagar's uh, combo 50-watt Marshalls and taking it to record with, because
Mm.
a lot of that early guitar sound, the rhythm guitar sound, was that amplifier. And if you listen to "I Can't Drive 55" and compare that guitar sound to the guitar sound on the first Night Ranger records, it's pretty damn spot on because it's the same amp.
Really?
Uh, yeah, just I remember more things like that. I mean, I've been so many different studios for so many you know
Mm.
tens of thousands of hours.
So, so during when Night Ranger's doing these demos and doing, because Night Ranger, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Night Ranger didn't play a lot of club dates. They did some here and there, but were you still doing the meat business while you were while they were getting Ranger on their feet?
Yep,
When
their gear was in my garage. They weren't going anywhere.
and
A free place to store the gear and
so
free trucks.
so here you are, you're doing the the meat business, you're kind of doing the guitar thing on the side. What was the motivation of doing that second job or whatever you want to say of being their tech? Was that okay, that's the career field I really want to do, or it's just a hobby, or
I totally fell into it because they kept asking, I kept doing.
mm.
You know,
And was the
kind of
first
became part of the clique. Pretty soon
mm,
it was a certain set of guys that were hanging around doing
yeah.
the crewage, and
Now, were you the only now again, I'm talking early, you know, Ranger recording the record. Um, were you the only crew guy, or was there anyone else? Was like maybe Tucker around, or
Tucker wasn't around yet. I don't think, not when I started. It was a guy by the name of Frank Codwa and his pals, and I can't remember past that anybody else. But he actually, I remember being in the Ryder truck with him over
hmm.
a certain period.
So you're doing the meat business, you're helping with with Ranger and stuff. What was it like when, tell us how you heard about Ozzy getting with Brad and your adventure with that.
Well, Brad called me up. He just got off the phone with Sharon, and he knew I had a couple Black Sabbath records, and he goes, "Hey, I need to borrow you. I'll be right over. I need to borrow your Black Sabbath records, because he wanted to start, obviously woodshedding immediately and learning the parts, because he, like I said, just got off the phone with Sharon, and unbeknownst to him, he had been recommended as the sole person to come try out for the band by Pat Thrall. Because as I understand it, Tommy Aldridge was given the task of finding a new guitarist. He called Pat Thrall. Pat Thrall was doing the Hughes Thrall project with Glenn Hughes, which I ended up going and touring with them too during the 82. When there was a hole in the Ozzy schedule because of Tommy Aldridge. Actually,
Mhm.
Tommy pulled me into that camp. I should have known Pat at that time, but I did not know Pat. But he graduated from the same high school as me and Brad and Danny Chauncey. All three of us in 4 consecutive years from the same high school.
That's a good little
Oh,
track record.
I just kind of an odd thing. It must have been the water or something. For all of us to end up in the guitar realm as well. It's kind of odd. But so he recommended Brad, and he was the one that showed up, and he got the gig.
So Brad goes out to like New York, right, for the audition. Um, do you remember him? Did he call you and say, "Hey, I got it. I need you to come out here with me"? Where did you?
He called up 3 days after he left, and he called me up and he goes, "Hi, this is Brad. Remember me?" And he goes, "You want to come out and work for me out here?" And well, I was kind of the only responsible human being he knew, probably. And so I said, "Well, at first, I said yes, of course." But I remember chatting with my brother, and my brother saying, "Man, if you don't do this, you'll never know what it was like, because you've always wanted to tour, deep down." And just as a kid, you never know that there's the niche of a crew guy that and it could end up being a career because I didn't even realize it was a career until
Mm.
I got offered the Purple Rain tour. And so, Tommy Marzullo, the production manager on the other end of the phone, was going, "It'll be great for your career." And I remember going,
What? That's
"Career,
yeah,
career." I didn't
yeah.
even see it happening. The next thing I knew, and then that's just band after band after band after band.
Mm.
Now who knows how many?
So
40,
was
almost like a month shy of 45 years of doing rock shows.
was the Ozzy tour the first? That was the first big arena tour, right? You had
Yeah.
done, and so that had to be, you know, I guess just crazy because you and Brad both are going into that being, I
Kids,
mean,
total kids.
I mean, Brad had some experience, with the Rubicon at Cal Jam and stuff like that, but no matter what, nothing probably, nothing. You can't. It's Ozzy, 1982. I mean, it's time when he's the biggest and the craziest and everything else. So you go out with Brad. Do you remember the first show you guys did?
His show was the night before mine. I think it was in Binghamton, New York.
Okay.
That's where they sent the gear to anyway, so I assume that's where it was.
Mm.
Um, and my first gig was the next night in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I
And
just remember my first night being really not very fun. And I remember him describing his first night as not being very fun either.
yes, I think he played the wrong, maybe
Well,
solo
just
or
the
something.
the side fills in that on
Mhm.
that stage were loud enough to cripple you with the keyboard fills. I mean, it was just brutally loud. And so I remember him describing that, there was one time he was down on his knees during the show, just going, "God, get me out of this," the kind of thing. Yeah.
What, so was there obviously after you get after the first couple shows and you kind of get on your feet, was there a moment where you were like, yes, this is definitely what I want to do, or
Well,
um
I was given an ultimatum 2 weeks in, right after I had called the meat company and, give them my 2 weeks notice
mm,
because I had a 3 week vacation I was on to do that tour. And I figured that somewhere along the line I'd have to, you know, stop working at the meat company because it
yeah,
was, if it worked. 2 weeks in, Ozzy gave me, I think, 2 days to make it louder, or I was out of there. So I was given an ultimatum, right after, literally the day after I had just given my 2 weeks notice at the meat company. So I was like, oh shit, I better get my shit
yeah.
together really fast. So I started reading countless manuals and that sort of thing to kind of get myself up to speed for something that was that big.
Was the other, technicians on that tour, were they helpful? Was it competitive and they weren't helpful? I mean,
I
starting out,
was the I was the new American guy that knew nothing, green as could be, and these guys were like ex Nazareth crew, and like English and Scottish,
yeah.
Glaswegians, and I was just complete. I couldn't understand a word that was being said in the back lounge. I was just sitting there, just trying to figure out word usage to figure out what words meant,
Mhm. Yeah.
because the English vernacular was the little, I was not aware
Yes. You know,
until that tour. Now
I
I can understand Glaswegian good as can be.
so, you're doing that with Brad. You obviously stay on because you made it louder. Um, uh, was Brad, what was, I know you got the call, um, to go do that. was there any time in between, or was that before that when you were in the studio with Brad and Ranger um, recording the Dawn Patrol record? What are your thoughts and what do you remember about the recording of that first record?
Um, Alan Zent's studio in Hollywood, California, in Orange Square, just off of Highland and Santa Monica.
And and that would have been before Ozzy,
Yes.
before you left for Ozzy. So when they're recording that, and I mean
Well,
you
actually, no, that's not true. They recorded after Brad had been in Ozzy for a while, and that's what got Rudy Sarzo into trouble. I guess he didn't tell Ozzy that he was doing the Quiet Riot record and got punched in the face in a bar
that
in
would have
Michigan.
that was at the Kalamazoo like
Yeah,
in '84 or something like that.
yeah.
Um,
But because Brad was straight up with Ozzy and
yeah.
Sharon saying that I'm recording with the other band, he didn't get punched,
Uh,
as I understand it.
yeah. Um, when so you're there when when Don't Tell Me You Love Me is being created. Were you there in the studio when they were recording it?
Most of it, except for that last guitar solo, because I was already in New York setting up
Okay.
for the Ozzy live or the
Was
Ozzy of the Devil record.
when you're hearing that stuff like in playback, are is it like, okay, this is just good, or is there like any moments where you're like, holy shit, I, s- I I was on the couch when they wrote that song and
Well, and the solos, because I was,
Mhm,
staying in the apartment.
mhm,
So as they literally wrote all those solos, I was sitting right there, and the two of them were in the living room, sitting
mhm,
there. And, we're all just sitting there.
yeah,
The guys were just, coming up with these blistering solos. I knew already just from seeing them live, doing Eddie coming out tonight and that kind of stuff,
mhm,
um, that they were badasses. But
yeah,
really, when they started honing the actual solos to make it on the record, or what they recorded,
mhm.
uh, it turned out amazing. I mean, Don't Tell Me You Love Me. I mean, that was, those guys, in my opinion, were the baddest guitar duo of the '80s.
Yeah. There's many that would
Or I'm going to
ag
catch a lot of shit for
ag agree with you, but before I get too
Just
far,
saying.
before I get too far down the road, I want to. Were you there when Night Ranger played the show with Motorhead?
Oh yeah, at
What
the
do you
Waldorf.
what do you
I
remember about that?
That Motorhead was way too loud. I
Well,
mean, it
I
was so loud it was inaudible. It was just overloading my ears. That's
was
what I remember.
was were how were the Motorhead fans towards Night Ranger?
Uh, don't remember that. I don't remember their reaction. That
Well,
was a long damn time ago.
and you're talking about the noise, the sound. I saw Motorhead in a rock club, Newport in Columbus, Ohio in '95, and I was in the very front. Like the PAs and everything are like off to the side and pointing out. And
Oh,
it was the only show. You remember, I'm 17, 18 years old. It was the only show where I was like, I need earplugs. And
well, it's the
I,
only way you could hear the content because it was so loud. It was distorting. Well,
I
distorting my.
mean, it was so loud it hurt. And I
Yeah.
was up front because Black Sabbath was coming on next. I wanted to be up very front. And it's like, well, I'm not giving up my spot, right? And I was ready to go back, give up my spot, and go get earplugs. And they ended it, thankfully. Not only was I all the way up front, but I was right in front of Lemmy. So, I'm getting spittle and stuff on me. And, you
Awesome.
know, so it was just
Did you
like,
save those clothes?
oh, it was great. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, if I ever meet someone who saw Motorhead, it's kind of like I have my Vietnam moment, like, oh, you can relate. Let me tell you about this. Um, I got a little piece of Night Ranger history. What could you tell me about this? I don't know if you can
Is that Guitar Wars?
Guitar
How
Wars.
many necks on that guitar? I can't see it.
Um,
I know where it is. I was there for all that.
that was
But
Guitar Wars. I guess it's just Guitar Wars 1.
well, does
It's
it have a single neck or a double neck?
single neck.
Then it was
It's
the first one.
It says May 29th, 1981, Phoenix Theater, Ranger Michael Spears Band, X and Fairleon or something like that.
Sure, I
There's
was there.
there's the
Uh,
back.
I I may have the Guitar Wars 2 shirt with the double
Ooh, ooh.
neck. Just saying. I should
Um,
chat about that later.
uh, I in the last episode I told the story how I got that. Someone had bought probably some lot of someone from San Francisco, and I had bought some pens and stuff, and um, I'm buddies with John Nyman from Y&T, who was in 415, which was Eric Martin band. So I got some 415 stuff, and anyways, I got that, and I think it's probably the first shirt that probably ever said Ranger on it. But
I would agree.
uh, I think that's the one where is that the one where they won and they were supposed to get free studio time or something? And
And as I remember, a monitor setup too.
and they
But none of that happened.
uh,
They made them do it again
mhm.
when there was a clear winner. I mean,
Yeah,
how you gonna how you
yeah.
gonna compete with Brad and Jeff in
Um,
that era? I mean, come on.
yeah. So you're out on the road with Ozzy, and was there ever a discussion, or did you ever think that maybe Brad would stay with Ozzy and leave Night Ranger?
We chatted about it.
And I mean, what was your thoughts at the time? Just yours. What would your
Well,
opinion would have been?
Fitz is the last thing Fitz said is we were leaving the Ducal Palace because at that point I think he was playing in the Alameda All Stars. And I remember him after the show saying, "Make sure you bring him back." When Brad was leaving to go do the Aussie thing, and I said, "Oh, I will," that kind of thing. But I remember me and Brad discussing it later. Well, what do you think? What do you think? You know? But Brad was his soul, and his heart was definitely more into the Night Ranger thing. Because I mean, at the time, Ozzy was all guys. It was not a single pretty face in the whole audience.
Well, that probably sold it for Brad.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the way I see it. Uh,
I mean, I mean,
so
maybe
that
it wasn't a hard decision if that's if that's the case.
well, I think that was probably the biggest thing because I mean it was just a bunch of dudes and
Mm,
leather and jeans, with block letters and AC.
yeah.
I guess it was before. Was
Yeah.
it before? I don't think
No,
even ACDC was on the shirts then.
yeah. I mean, Back in
It might have
Black
been
would have been.
before then.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, you do think, I mean, you know, Black Sabbath, Ozzy. I mean, you definitely don't think, you know, chicks at the time. You're definitely that's a um,
Definitely
guy
during that
band.
era. There was like two chicks in the whole
Mm,
audience.
yeah. Um, uh, and they were probably dudes too. Now, did you do the European tour with Brad and Ozzy in like, November, December of 82?
Yes.
All right, so you basically were there. Now you gotta see Pete Way then with him, right?
That's one way of putting it.
You got any good Pete Way stories
Mm,
that you can tell?
No, I don't. I'm going to choose not to.
So those that don't know, Pete Way was a bass player in UFO. Rudy Sarzo that we had mentioned, who was in Quiet Riot or went back to Quiet Riot. He was on the first US part of the Ozzy tour when in late 82 when they did Europe, Brad was over there and then Pete Way was the bass player. So you really didn't have any time off because you guys came right back from that European tour and Dawn Patrol was just released
Yep.
and you guys I think maybe went up to the Midwest at the
Yep.
end it, or
Well,
not the
we
not
literally we went straight to the Northeast
that's what I meant to
with
say.
Kiss. I
Well,
remember driving in the
did
driving snow to
did
start with.
at the end of the year of 82, did you guys go to like Washington with maybe like Hart and
We did
some
potentially three shows, and I think it ended up being two
okay.
because the club that we were supposed to play in Reading, who wasn't done, the construction wasn't done. There still wasn't even quite a stage, as I remember. But we were there anyway. We were ready to go, and found out it wasn't. It was still under construction, and then we went ahead and did a show in Portland and did a show in Seattle, both with Hart and I think Aldo Nova.
Were those would have been the first two Dawn Patrol shows, correct? Like
I think
after the album's released?
I kind of forgot about those until you
Mhm.
just mentioned it.
Well, I think Kelly had told me something about that, and I try to piece all the history together um and I think he thought maybe it was Loverboy, but I don't know if he knew for sure either. I just know he knew it was and I could be wrong too.
It was Hart, and we played.
Well, I know it was
I can even tell you the gigs. We
really.
played the Portland downtown. We played the crap whatever the theater was downtown called at that particular time. Right down there on Broadway, just off the park. Out the back door was the little strip park that's in Portland, or at least was then.
Mhm. And
Uh,
then
and
Seattle.
then Seattle, the arena there.
Was either of those shows like on New Year's Eve?
I believe the Seattle show was on New
Okay.
Year's Eve.
Because then right after that, you guys go on to the Creatures of the Night tour with Kiss. And in the Kiss world, though at the time it wasn't a very well attended Kiss tour, in the history of Kiss, um, it's a popular tour. I mean, people love that record. People, looking back, they love that lineup, which was it was a weird era for Kiss because Kiss, at top of the world in the 70s and 79. They really didn't tour the States in 80. They released a concept record that was really left of center in 81, didn't tour at all. So Kiss was at their lowest at this point. They come
You know a lot
back,
about those
excuse me.
guys. You know a lot about those
I
guys.
do. I was a big Kiss fan growing up. Um, and so Creatures of the Night was like Kiss's return to rock and a heavy record. And they had the new drummer, Eric Carr. And even though on the album cover of Creatures of the Night, you had Ace Frehley, Vinnie Vincent was the the guitar player. So again, like you said, January, February of 83, um, Night Ranger is on this huge tour with with Kiss.
That's actually how I got the offer for the Purple Rain tour. Was those guys were giving Vinny a lot of crap about his guitars not being in tune with the rest of the band, and he was using the Floyd Rose, the early Floyd Roses without the fine tuners tremolo system. And Brad and I had just done a year of it with Ozzy, so we already
Mhm.
had it down. So the production staff, Tommy Marzullo, asked me if I would sort Vinny out and his tech. So I did. I went into the dressing room and I showed him our way of doing it. And then thusly he was in tune with the band, oddly But Kiss is aware of that even to this day that I got involved in that whole thing.
Really. Um, well, let's kind of let's go, with Kiss. I mean, I mean, that had to be, I mean, you go from Ozzy, which is a big production, to maybe even a bigger production. I mean, it had a tank on stage and the makeup and whatever else. Just what's some of your memories of Kiss from that time period?
Mostly that we were doing extremely cold gigs.
You guys were like in North Dakota and
Well, I just remember starting in upstate New York with those guys and
hmm.
driving to the location on solid ice and snow.
um, what did you think of? I mean, what was the biggest difference between Kiss and Ozzy? Like not musically, but like production and you know, uh, because it's like, oh, not every band is doing
Well,
this.
for me, it wasn't as much about the production as the size of the audiences were definitely bigger with Ozzy.
Hmm. And I mean, and then being like a tech, and you just shared the story of helping Vinny with his equipment. What were your thoughts of Vinny as a player?
He was a good player.
Hmm. Um,
Nothing that I really remember him
hmm.
doing that was outstanding because I was already working for Brad.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty hard to get impressed with anything else that's going on.
So with Night Ranger now, you guys are hitting these big arena shows with Kiss, and in between, you guys are playing some club dates as well. Just what take us back to your life then. I mean, are you
Never
regretting?
slept, never slept at all. At that point, we were doing all the driving too, as well as setting up for everybody. And in that era, I was taking care of all three. Brad, Jack, and Jeff. So I had a pretty full day, just getting their stuff ready and stringing all their crap every day. And in that era, using the Nady 400 systems, which were all located, the frequencies were located on the FM dial, finding holes on the FM dial where there was not a radio station or something, so that I could get the guitars to work every night, which was really a chore.
Did you ever have those Spinal Tap moments when you had the Air
Oh yeah.
Force radio?
Oh, I remember one time Jeff's rig just going off ballistically. I carried cab or something. That was just, it
Yeah.
was such a Spinal Tap moment. Had I not been, trying to fix it right then, I probably would have laughed at that particular moment. Now I would have.
You mentioned driving and stuff. What was was there a bus and a truck, or were you
Oh
guys
yeah.
in station wagons
At
or?
one point, no, no, it was a bus, and it was the manager owned a bus, so it was his bus first. Bruce Cohen,
Mhm.
his bus first. And actually, oddly enough, there was longer bunks on that bus. I would know because I'm too damn tall for most of it. But myself, I was always in the Ryder truck driving to the next gig with the gear more often than anything because I had the most trucking experience because of the meat companies.
Mhm. Was
And I
there
could wake all night, which was more than I could say about the other guys on the crew.
um was there was there ever like a moment, during the very beginning where you were like you ever look back and like maybe I should have kept with
Nope,
the um
nope.
and so you do the Kiss tour, Dawn Patrol starting to take off. Do you remember do you remember anything like with MTV, like um, seeing their video for the first time or their
Sure.
thoughts? What do you remember about that? Because that was right at the birth of you know MTV and it becoming
What seems to me, things like Don't Tell Me You Love Me video, for instance, when the leaves and shit are blowing in their face. I'm
Mm.
pretty sure either Blades or Gillis got some of that debris in their eye during the course of that recording. That's about the only thing I really remember about that.
When did the when did the Prince Purple Rain come along? Was that in between Dawn Patrol and Midnight Madness?
uh, well, I was offered it. Uh, I guess Tommy Marzullo went on after Kiss to do Prince, and he called me up because he, knew I knew about Floyd Roses and stuff, and I'd fixed some problems for him there, so he offered me that. Uh, Brad wrote me a check not to go, and so the first time Prince offered me the gig, I didn't take it. I waited till the third time, which by then he was some artist known as somebody else. We used to call him Hook, Line, and Sinker because that's what the little um, icon meant to us.
So you actually you were offered the gig maybe in the Purple Rain era, but you didn't take it till later on.
That's correct.
Okay.
It was the
Um,
third time they offered it to me when I finally had time on my schedule to do it.
so with the Dawn Patrol tour ending, you know, there's other outside Prince and them trying to get you um to jump ship. When Night Ranger would go in, let's say to record Midnight Madness, would you would your job continue with them in the studio?
Yep, and in rehearsals.
So what would you do? What was your job in in the studio and rehearsal?
Well,
I guess how
uh,
did it differ than being on the road?
it was well, you got to go home at night. That was a big one. And I didn't have to drive all the time, which meant I was a little more rested. But tuned all the guitars on all those records, keeping all the strings on all the guitars, maintaining all the gear, getting the sounds to a degree as well. I remember having back surgery during the course of one of the recordings of Night Ranger, one of the records, in 1987, and I think it was nice. I think it was
80s?
87, but I can't remember if they recorded anything back
That was
then.
Big Life.
Oh, was it?
Mm.
Okay, well then during the course of that record, I was having back surgery, and I remember coming straight out of the hospital and going straight. Biff picked me up in my van and took me to the studio to sort out some issues that were going on, some intonation problems, that sort of thing. On the, because he would use sometimes other people's instruments and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So, I'd have to go in there and touch him up a little bit. And I remember not moving very well and leaning on Biff, get into the room all
Mm.
crooked and everything. But so yeah, I was involved pretty heavily in all those recordings.
What?
And towards the end, I actually recorded a lot of the performance, the drum performances and stuff, in case we want to
Mm.
add bigger sounds later if we wanted.
When you're in the studio, let's say with, Midnight Madness, um, I mean, is there ever a moment when you hear something like, holy shit, like, all right, I thought they were good then. This just takes it to another level. Or do you hear something that, oh shit, I bet that's going to be a hit. Do you have any of those thoughts? I mean, what do you remember? Because you're hearing these songs before the public. Do you remember them recording Sister Christian? Just what's some of your memories of being in the studio?
Yeah, as John Van Ness put it, the sound of the big room at Alan Zent's studio and the sound of the uh, boogie amplifiers was the lead solo sound for Sister Christian. I just remember the print, so that's what I would remember most about that recording.
Hmm. And
But I remember setting it up in that
yeah,
room, if that's what you mean. And
were
we moved it around and made it so it sounded just right.
When you're doing that, I mean, I don't know how close or invested in you are, but when you're hearing what they're recording, of course you're not probably going to give your opinions and stuff like that. But in your head, are you thinking, all right, this is good? I mean, or, you know,
But yeah, those guys are exceptional musicians,
mm,
so pretty much everything they did was
yeah,
amazing. You know, some solos I like more than others because of the technical aspects,
mm.
mostly that sort of thing.
Now, were you when they did the Midnight Madness album cover shoot, and there's all kinds of characters on that record. Are you anywhere to be found on that record? On
I
that
am,
album?
I am.
Yeah.
I'm
So
the gorilla on the fire escape on the backside of that record,
well, there you go. A little bit.
chasing the schoolgirls on the. We were in a Paramount backlot or Warner's backlot right there in Burbank, about 100 degrees out, and I was in a rubber suit, being the gorilla. And I just remember taking off my hand from time to time and pouring out the sweat because it was so damn hot. But because I'm so tall, allegedly it was the only thing that would fit me.
Now, who I'm trying to see if I got
Now turn it over on the back side. You'll see a gorilla chasing a schoolgirl on the fire escape.
there we go. It'd be right
Me.
there. There we go. There.
I
So
haven't seen that in years. That's
so
funny.
now I think was this Bruce Cohn? Do you remember?
Oh, yes.
And were any of the other crew guys like you know,
Those guys were mostly the Jeff's friends,
okay,
band hangers on
all
kind of
right.
dudes, friends.
And the guy, I always tell people you think when you look at the cover, you think there's five band members, but no one ever pays attention to this guy. Do you know who the hell that is?
Huh. Kind of looks like the guy who did uh, the original videos for Night
Um,
Ranger.
I don't know. It's just always, kind of funny. Like you never think
I
about.
never noticed that.
Yeah, I just noticed it one day. Like, hey, there's someone on Brad's shoulder there.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, there was a bunch of us in there, and that
yeah,
I'm just trying to remember who all was there. I
and
wouldn't be surprised. It seems to me he was there, and that's probably him.
if you look on the back here, you got stage manager Mark Newman. Was Dawn Patrol the first record you had your name on?
Yes.
That had to be kind of cool to see. I mean, sure after a while it became, part of the business, but
Well, as I remember, credits and that kind of stuff. The first time I noticed a crew guy on a record was Bison, Jeff Banks, guitar tech for the Three Sides Live Genesis record.
okay.
So it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition for me to now have my name on a record.
So Midnight Madness is released. You're playing clubs and stuff. And then all of a sudden, Sister Christian gets released. And obviously it takes him to another level. What's your memories of that era, before Sister Christian and after Sister Christian?
The only thing I remember about levels changing and that kind of stuff was we played the Ohio State Fair the first time, and there was 40,000 people in the audience, and we just went, "Holy shit!" They're all singing the songs and stuff. We were
Mhm.
pretty amazed at how far it'd come at that point,
Mhm.
but kind of got used to it after a while.
What's funny is now that was August of 85, actually. That was Seven Wishes. Um, and that was the show that, this I tell the story all the time on the podcast. I was 6 years old when I became a Night Ranger fan, and
I
I
get that a lot.
I begged my grandma to take me to the High State Fair to see Night Ranger. And
Yeah.
my aunt, it was a free show. There wasn't really any place to see Night Range or see big bands in Columbus at the time. There was no arenas or anything like that. So this was the big deal for all the teenagers, right? And it was a free show. You just paid for the admission. So my aunt got there at like 10 a.m. And of course I'm just turned 8 years old. I'm not going to be down in the front and everything. But my grandma, took me at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, 8-year-old with no phone or anything like that. 4 hours I waited for Night Ranger to come on the stage. There was a huge food fight before the show. I just saw all this food, being thrown down. Just for an 8-year-old, this was just mind blowing. I got the necklace and the shirt, and it's just funny you mentioned that show. But it'll be 40 years this August 18th was 1985, and um, my um, that was my first Night Ranger show. I was 8 years old.
There's a
So
handful of those necklaces that are actually made of silver.
really, they
I own one of them.
I I still got my original. It's put away. I mean, I have this reproduction one,
Sure.
but um uh so Night Ranger, does Sister Christian explodes. Night Ranger now, did you sense anything different when they went in to record Seven Wishes? I mean,
For me, it was the same.
okay. Do you remember anything, the writing of that record? I mean, do you remember Sentimental Street? I mean, do you remember any of that stuff? Or did you see them change at all? I mean, just, they went from this
I
young, hungry
remember like the solo to 4 in the morning just being
Jeff
amazing.
Jeff Watson. Yeah.
Actually, the Gillis portion is what I'm talking about. That
Um,
at the end of the solo,
oh,
just
okay, okay.
the whole
Wait,
band thing, amazing.
okay. Because I talk about um the everybody thinks Brad and Jeff, and especially Jeff, of them being shredders. And I just, I always, talk about, I bring up 4 in the morning and stuff about how melodic they actually were. They, something when if they, of course there's solos where they got all these notes, but it's like, some of those solos,
Well, Brad
is,
was is a feel king.
mhm,
He just has a real good sense of rhythm, and the solos he does always say something. The thing I complain about going and seeing jams and stuff is you see the guys play the same 5 notes over and over. And how long can you sit and listen to a pentatonic scale before you're just
mhm,
weary? And those guys never did that. Especially Brad. He just
yeah.
had something to say with his guitar, had some feel.
Did what did you see? Was there any changes from, because Seven Wishes is that's the height of Night Ranger. Um, they had two top 10 hits, a top 20. They basically ruled MTV for another year and a half after Sister Christian. Um, that had to be one interesting for you to be along for that ride, to being, driving Ryder trucks and out in Fargo to suddenly it's platinum records and better equipment, better staging, better rides. Um, just what is some of your thoughts of just the Seven Wishes tour and that the height of it?
Well, the things I think about is the box, the genie box,
Mhm.
and Biff being the genie during the little
I
lead
was
song.
gonna I was going to ask you that.
Oh boy.
So
We're a
so
lot of
the
hokey scale now.
so the silhouette with the guy, with the sword, that was Biff.
Yep.
Okay.
It really
Uh,
wasn't a silhouette. It was more of a behind the screen, and
yeah, I was.
it wasn't. He would. They'd turn on his light, and then he'd be there, and then all of a sudden he'd disappear
Yeah.
because it was all about magic and
Mhm.
the magic lamp where the band members came out of the lamp every night to
Yeah.
get on stage. So those are the things I remember.
Mhm. What
The logistical stuff.
whatever happened to that lamp?
Hmm, don't know.
I was hoping you said you had it in your backyard or something.
No, probably stayed. It probably was. Oh no, I think that actually went back to Copperfield.
Okay. So it was like a rental or something like that, like
Something like
equipment
that.
they rental.
Because
Mhm.
it was his gig. I mean, it was his magic act.
Now, just give us what would be your typical day on a Seven Wishes, August of 85. What were you doing still Jeff, Brad, and Jax, or were you um, just Brad at that point?
Well, it was never just Brad. It was always Brad and Jack at the minimum. Uh, in the early days, when they were out playing the first record or so, uh, there was only a few of us on the crew, and the guy who set up the keyboards, Tucker, would go out and run the front of house. So during the show, he wasn't available, and the guy who set up the drums for Kelly, Frank, was out front doing the lights. So during the show, I technically was taking care of all five of them, and they kind of came up with a game. They'd all call my name at the same time and see which way I came running first. So there was a lot of prioritization that had to go into my little head at that time uh, to see who was really in trouble and who was just fucking with me.
Um,
So those are the things I remember more than anything. Logistical stuff.
what has changed? What's like the biggest difference between, being on the road, setting up gear now as compared to then? Has there been any technology advances that like, shit, that used to take me 3 hours and now I can do it in 20 minutes? I mean, what's
Well,
this?
it's funny you ask that because not everybody necessarily shifted gears technologically. Um, a lot of bands I work for still use amps and stuff, the Kiss guys. Because I did end up working for Kiss for almost a decade for the lead guitarist, Tommy Thayer, here more recently until they retired. I was there until the last gig. But he was very basic amps and a couple of stomp boxes, and I would control all that stuff during the show, and actually controlled his wah pedal too when he used to do the national anthem on one of the tours.
Mhm.
Um, because obviously with those boots on, I can't imagine him playing a wah pedal would be pretty ridiculous. Um, Plus, having it up on stage is, Kiss wasn't that kind of band. Having to
Yeah.
me, having a big pedal board up there was just in the way. They had a lot of production elements going on. But I was always used to running the effects for the guys. During the early days with Night Ranger, I had a pager box on my belt that would turn on and off the lead channel and two of the effects. And even in that era, for him, they were all rack mount effects for Brad. Um, coming out of Ozzy, we were using rack mounted effects then too. Um, but technologically, recently, when I was working for Matchbox 20, there was a rack or a set of racks, 4 racks wide for a mono guitar signal. It was hideous. It had nothing but problems, and it was just awful. And Kyle let me convert him to Kemper rig. And I'm telling you, boy, it sounds great every night. The sounds are all usable out front. The house engineer, Jim Yakubuski, was very thrilled at the sounds, the upgrades. And now it's part of the set. I think we wrote like 300 presets for an hour and a half set because he likes to continue pushing the up button on the pedal board all the way through the set. And it, of course, tells him where he is in the set, actually, as a result of the presets coming up on the pedal board. And actually, that's how Tommy Shaw knew the next songs, too, both with Styx and with Damn Yankees when I worked for him, is I would bring up the next song before he was done, technically, with the song he was playing, just so the next song was on the screen on the pedal board. So I've always run pedal boards for guys and hit the right buttons at the right times, live, that sort of shit.
So how does a band like, you're talking about Matchbox 20, who have, been touring for decades, and you come in and you're like, hey, this needs work. And,
I wasn't the first one to say that, believe me.
you
There
know,
was I inherited that gig from Moby, and Moby wasn't too pleased with the rig either. And anybody who saw it would
mm,
realize the ridiculousness of it and the limitations of it. Now there are no limitations.
yeah,
The new rig, I mean, it's all studio effects, the great sounds.
mm,
I can't say enough about the Kemper stuff.
yeah.
They they really did the right thing. They kind of cracked the code on sound, guitar sound, as far as I'm concerned.
So what sets like a guitar, guitar tech apart? Like what makes a good tech? Not a good tech, but what makes a great guitar tech, in your
Uh,
opinion?
Getting the guitars in tune,
Or
first of
key?
all,
You
because
would
they
think.
just they well, you would think that would be the the thing, but Tommy Thayer says I'm the first guy that ever got his guitars in tune, and he loved the fact that they didn't go out of tune.
Yeah, I could see like going out of tune, like somehow working magic to keep them in tune. It's like I think if you just,
I have a formula, believe me.
yeah, um, and like what, like let's say there's someone out there who's looking to get into the business. What would be just a couple pieces of advice that you would give them?
Don't do it.
Stay
No,
with the
actually,
stay with the
it's
meat
not.
company.
Well, yeah. I don't think I'd go that far. I mean, I certainly have, gotten to travel the world as a result of what I do. And as a crew guy that actually could get past the hotel bar in the lobby of the hotel and walk around all the major cities of the world, I, as a result, know them all fairly well, and I don't get lost anywhere. I mean,
Mm,
I could walk through London, I could walk through Tokyo, I could walk through Moscow, uh, anywhere, Helsinki,
yeah,
and I know all those cities really well.
yeah.
I know
I
where all the stuff is.
think,
I can show you in Moscow where their space shuttle is parked. You know what I
oh,
mean?
dude, that would be cool. What, like two of them, right? In that abandoned hangar?
One of them that I'm aware of is in Gorky Park.
Okay. Um,
I
so
went to their space center and there wasn't shit there. I was disgusted by it
yeah,
because I've been to ours.
mhm,
Ours is pretty badass, a bunch of
yeah,
spacecraft. But I got there and there was like, where's the spacecraft?
yeah. Um,
Two rovers and this and that,
mhm,
and they actually had a model of our Saturn V. Was
yeah.
like probably the centerpiece, and it was just like, God, what the? This is you know, their big space center in Moscow.
I think you said something was important. If you could make it past the hotel bar,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's, probably,
Well, I don't really have a connection with alcohol personally.
yeah,
Never did. It always made me feel
mm,
horrible. I've
yeah,
been drunk maybe 5 times in my entire life, and they were when I was a youth,
yeah,
very young. Uh, So for me, walking past the hotel bar is nothing. But I find that most crew guys don't actually get out of the hotel till they're in their 40s
yeah,
to finally go out and see something.
mm,
And I'm usually the guide
yeah,
going, come on, guys, let's go out here and I got to show you something. What do you want to see? That kind of thing.
yeah,
Because I know all the cities, you know,
yeah.
pretty damn well for 45 years of touring.
And I'm sure when you're younger too, for some people it's easy to get caught up in the lifestyle and
Well, the
you,
lifestyle is what you make of it.
Mm.
You can turn it into a total party, or you can make it a career and last a little while.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of crew guys come and go in their first couple of years. That's pretty standard.
Yeah.
I don't see people lasting very long
Mm.
throughout my career. There's only a few of us that are still around that made it through COVID.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
only the disease itself, but the fact that it shut everything down for us.
Mm.
And then later on, COVID killing the guitar tech standing next to me that took care of Paul Stanley.
Yeah. Yeah.
That blew my mind to
Yeah.
watch that happen.
Stan, that was his name, Stan?
No,
No.
Fran.
Fran.
Yes, Francis
Um,
Stuber was his actual.
yeah. Uh, I was actually on my way to Dayton to see that show, and I knew someone I knew knew someone in the Kiss camp, and he texted me. He knew that I was going to the show that that day or the next day. I can't remember if it was that night. And he's like, "Hey man, I can't really give you any details, but the Kiss show, and I think it was Dayton I was going to." He goes, "It's not going to happen." I think it was that morning.
There was a
Yeah,
few shows right in that era that got
yeah.
canceled or postponed.
Well, they announced it a couple hours later that he had passed. So, like I said, I was going to that show, taking my son, and I mean, I think that was a big, I don't know, I mean, a big, I won't say wake up call, because I think we all kind of knew people that had passed from COVID, but I think it was the first big crew member of a, huge band that, um, what, so do you think, I mean, with COVID shutting everything down, has the business come back 100%, or is it still, you know,
Well, I find some organizations still kind of have weird COVID things, and band members that don't necessarily want to show up as a result and that kind of stuff.
mm,
I'm not going to name any names, but I've just noticed that a little bit.
yeah,
But it's not really widespread. I think everybody just wanted to get back to work.
yeah,
I certainly did. I mean, 2 years off, I was in pretty much clearing my own property with a chainsaw. You know, now there's a house being built there.
yeah.
Finally,
Well, let's go with like the Seven Wishes, Night Rangers, top of the world. Just, I'm going to throw out a couple names. Just give me what your thoughts of what it was like touring the world with them in the 80s. Give us a couple fit stories. Fit.
On EBN. Are you ready? Night Ranger!